So the idea is let's explore some, let's say, issues, some distortion that happen during the estimation process. Before saying that, just let's say a warning. There are very famous, if you want, papers and research on this topic. So I will not try to overlap too much with that studies. For example, one of the most famous studies is related to the planning fallacy, and so I will, let's say, I will cover some of the topics, but not all of them, because let's say they are so, if you want, famous, and you can really Google it very quickly, that I don't want to say what maybe you already know or what is very easy to discover. So I will try to give you some additional and maybe a little bit strange aspect on the psychology of estimate. Well, first of all, let's set up the ground. That is, well, in a project environment, we have a lot of estimates, because we have, for example, estimates on time, and this is the typical estimates, and it is, if you want, the main focus of this presentation. Then another type of estimates is related, of course, to the cost of tasks, cost of activities, cost of the resources. And speaking about resources, of course, we have human resources and also material resources. And finally, when applied, we have also estimates related to risk management. This is one of my favorite pictures related to project risk management, and especially this is related to the mitigation strategy. However, projects are plenty of estimates, so one of the typical issues is we have to improve our ability to estimate. Why? For a very simple reason, because if our estimates are wrong, probably we are not able to meet the deadline, or let's say, or the project budget, and also the amount of resources that is needed in order to achieve our project. So this is the background. This is the introduction. So let's start by looking at the different issues, the different psychological issues in the estimating process. The first one is the focus on technical aspect. What does it mean? It means that some people, and in general all the people, but in this case is especially those with a very technical courses of study and profession, tend to base their estimates focusing only on the technical problems without considering the influence that other people or other activities may have in the performance of the activity in question. So it means when we estimate, in this case, very often we are optimistic. Why? Because instead of estimating the whole task, we just estimate a portion of the task. The portion of the task is the one related to really doing the job from a technical perspective. Why we do this? For a simple reason. So the technical job means, for example, if I was speaking about programming, for example, in my mind, if I have to write code, in my mind is, okay, how long does it take to code this, for example, this specific requirement? The problem is, in our brain, the technical aspect, that is, it's considered the core issue of the task, is the core problem. All the other issues, for example, the interruptions, the rework, the mistakes, are considered very often like exceptions. And so since they're exception, what happened? That normally we tend to say, for the future, I will be able to avoid the exception, and since they're exceptions, the exception will not happen the next time. So very often, again, we repropose an optimistic estimate because we are too focused on the technical aspect, because all the other aspects are considered exceptions and not rule. And very often we are wrong, because also the interruptions very often are rules and not exception in a given business environment. This is one of the, let's say, explanation behind this issue. The second explanation is that I hope, and I guess you agree with me, that when we estimate, very often it means that thinking about what will happen in the future. When we think about what is going to happen in the future, we create in a mental form a kind of narrative. That is, we think in a narrative form. Now, the problem with narrative, nothing but with narrative form, there is only one issue. A narrative form is like a script, that is, you are writing, in this case you are thinking about what will happen in the future. When you create a narrative form, you are using a sequential and very logical thinking. That is, first I will do this, then I will do that, then I will do that. In this way, there is no room for exceptions, because when you write a script, very often you don't open 1,000 parentheses, because the parenthesis is a kind of an exception, is an interruption in the discourse. So in this case, what happened? That since we think in a narrative form, again, we tend to underestimate the complexity of the task, because a narrative form is very logic, is very lean, is very clean. So this is another reason why we tend to focus only on technical aspects. Another issue, let's see, the precision versus approximation. There are people that prefer to be very precise. So if you ask them how long it will take a specific task, they say, okay, it will be 5 days and 4 hours. So very precise. Other people just react, okay, it will take days. So they approach the problem in a completely different way. Just to depict the approach, someone can say it's around 100. Other people say, no, it's not 100, it's 99. So I want to be very precise. On the other side, there are people like our friend, our plumber, that you can read by yourself the approach that is slightly different. Okay. That is, this is really based on, let's say, individual approaches. I will give you an example of a case study that happened to me a few months ago. This is it's 100% real. I know that is written in however, I'm going to read and interpret it. It happened a few months ago. We are speaking about a company in north of Italy. It's let's say an average company for the Italian standard. We are saying that is $150 million, for example. And what happened? We were in a meeting, a planning meeting for the construction of a new industrial plant, okay? Because this company is growing, and so they need a new industrial plant. And so the secretary and the managing director of a company that produce steel coils, this is what they do, an offer sent by fax for the construction of a machine nearly identical to one that the same supplier had built 4 years ago. So the same supplier built 4 years ago the same machine. Then what was the reaction of the CEO of the company? And they say they are crazy. How do they think they are dealing with inexperienced people? Why there was this reaction? Because again, the same machinery after the same with, let's say, a few small modifications, after 4 years, the original cost, the original estimate was 450,000 euros with a time frame of 12 months. The offer, so what the CEO was expecting, I say, okay, more or less it will be 4 years past, but here the inflation, the price growth is close to zero in Italy at that year. So I said, okay, more or less the price will be roughly the same and maybe just a little bit more. And the schedule, the expectation was, well, if they ask 12 months and they did in 12 months, this is the second time they will build a very similar machinery. I expect 10, 11 months. Now, the offer was 6 months delivery time, so let's say a lot more, but impressive, the price growth, the price increase, 800,000 euros. So, of course, let's say the CEO was pretty angry. So during this meeting, there was me, there is the CEO, there was the general manager, and also the manager of the technical office, who had designed the machine both 4 years before and also for this specific machinery. So it was, let's say, the father of the machinery. So the managing director would like to, let's say, solve the issue very quickly, and so I say, okay, I want to estimate very quickly if this offer makes sense or not. The feeling is that it doesn't make any sense, but however, I want to understand a little bit better. So he started to make some calculations, and I say, okay, let's try and understand in broad terms how much material and how much labor goes into this machine. We know that the cost of labor has increased by around 3% per year. So over 4 years, that's around 12 to 15%.